Amanda, tell us about yourself. Tell us tell us about yourself. What have you done, and what are you doing?
So I am in the Central Florida area. I primarily function as a business operations consultant, but that kind of funds my passion project. I'm a visual artist myself. Um, I own several businesses. I own a private chef business with a friend. Um, I own two art brands, I own the consulting business, and I ran a nonprofit organization for 10 years that I started as well.
Okay. You haven't actually written a book yet. I think that's. Have you published a book?
I am not a published author. I actually am working on a book that should go to print in the spring of 25. I picked the worst two topics in the history of the world to write about. I chose to write about the influence of artificial intelligence on art, particularly war photography. So I'm writing about the American military and AI and art, which, very popular subjects. People love both, I'm sure. But it's called AI and the Art of War.
Okay. You spend some time teaching writers.
I
Um,
did. I spent 16 years in
yeah.
public education teaching secondary and post-secondary English language and English literature to students in Florida.
What do you find is the greatest difficulty that writers seem to encounter when they decide they're going to write a book?
I think people, when they're going out on a creative endeavor started as a passion project, they're very excited to put their story out into the world and celebrate um, their experience and share that experience with the world. But I think the business side of creativity gets in the way of that. And I think that's the obstacle. Um, you know, for a very long time, our chain of our supply chain, our workflow was very just separate from our own experience. So you had a publishing house, that publishing house managed your public relations, they managed your marketing, they found you an editor, they attached you with the literary agent, they handled the legal aspect of it. Very similar to the art world. You attached yourself to a gallery and the gallery kind of handled all the business of it. As our economy and our world is changing in scale and scope, so much of that business aspect is falling on the individual creative, and it gets to be such a time burden to manage your social media account and have out your website and coordinate with your graphic designer for your book cover or make sure that the catering shows up to your art opening and book your own venue. And it just becomes this huge operational burden on a creative that the creativity just kind of goes out the window because the creativity was the thing that you do and you love and you're very good at managing that time, but this business aspect of it is now a job that you don't have the skill set for, don't have the knowledge base for, and learning all of that and managing all of that completely destroys your creative time but also your creative energy.
Well, yes, presumably, though, a person would write the book first and then address the business end of it. Once they had the writing out of the way, one would have thought, rather than trying to bring the two arms along in parallel. Another thing I found about talking to writers on social media was that they do become extraordinarily uptight about the task, and they tend to overwrite and to worry about word for word rather than just relaxing and getting on with it. Do you
I've
find
had a
that?
very similar experience, especially with students who were new to the writing space, and a few of my students have gone on to be published authors themselves. But I think in those early phases when you're first getting started with the process, you let the editing get in the way of the creativity. And it's just like you have to get out of your own way, tell your own story, set that creative process in motion, and then treat editing as that very separate experience. Go back to it later. Don't let the editing get in the way of the good stuff.
Yes, I suppose in a way, Amazon and that kind of thing have been a great help. And in another way, they have been a bit of a nuisance because it's very, very hard to find, for example, an editor now or somebody to take your book on or somebody to give you some help.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that experience as well. Two of the three students who published, self-published through Amazon, one gentleman is a poet and he has three books that he's published, and Amazon was a godsend because he's a chiropractor, he's a professional chiropractor, and I don't think publishing a book of poetry would have been an open path for him previously. Um, but Amazon has definitely been a pathway to open that up. But it also became a very big business burden for him after the first book, because if you know, sales and marketing were completely on his shoulders, and that's really where it got in the way of him telling his story through poetry in a second and a third book. I do have one student who is blessed to be working with a large publishing house on a book about politics. And incidentally, all of the political vetting is what got in the way of the politics, because when you're writing about multiple political campaigns, it's running, you know, this aspect by this campaign and this candidate and what's allowed to be told and what really isn't something that can be put in publication in print. So there's a lot of editorial oversight with his writing experience, writing about the business aspect of politics in America.
Yes, I suppose it's a two-person job, one person to write and the other person to look after the marketing. What are your feelings about marketing? Um, I know it's a huge question, but how would you synopsize it, if you like?
I am very grateful for the team of people that help me do my marketing. That is something that I contract or subcontract out depending on what the aspect of it is. I don't want to be a web developer. I don't want to run Facebook ads. I don't want to do email campaigns. I don't want to do text messaging campaigns. But I knew all of those things were going to be very critical for me with my own art sales. We have a campaign plan for the book release. So that was something that I started reaching out to experts, because I was not the expert in that field. Some of my experts are overseas, my web developers in Nigeria, my social media manager is in the Philippines, and my campaign manager is here in the US.
People will say to you that they have a limited budget, and that's often a problem. And they'll say, I can't afford to spend a lot of money on a book cover and spend a lot of money on an editor and spend money here, there, and everywhere. Because if I do all that, I'll end up bankrupt. Not to mention not selling very many books. I think people should be aware that writing is not necessarily going to be financially rewarding. Do you agree?
I
You
do
do?
agree. Yeah, definitely. I mean, when I launched into the visual art space, I knew I was telling a story I wanted to tell in a way that I could tell it, but I knew it wasn't what I wanted to pay my mortgage with. I didn't want my bills to be dependent upon my creativity, which is why I think business operations consulting kind of came in as a saving grace, because I was good at systems and processes and team building, and that pays the bills. Which is great because it allows me to experiment a lot as an artist. It allowed me the opportunity to say, hey, I want to take a leap off this cliff and maybe think about writing this book and finding the time to do that. I do think your budget gets in the way a lot. Um, I definitely started working with people before I could really afford it, which is why I went to the Philippines and I went to Nigeria to find these remote global workers, because I could provide a very competitive wage offer to those employees who had the skills and knowledge and expertise to do the work that would have been an insult to an American-based worker. My social media manager out of the Philippines has 29 days of paid leave. He just had a baby with his wife. They took a month off together, which I paid, his leave. And I've been able to help him and his wife have a lifestyle that I couldn't give to somebody in the States. And Alex is incredible. Alex is amazing. He does a fantastic job of managing my social media campaigns and does quite a bit of my executive assistant work. So it's been a win for both sides of that dynamic. And I think from a social justice aspect, that's extremely important to make sure that you're mindful of employing people in a way that makes you socially responsible and respectful of their humanity.
Yes. Did you, as a matter of interest, did you actually physically go to Nigeria and Philippines, or did you do that online?
I did that online. I wish I had that travel budget. I do not have that travel budget, but there are several online platforms that you can find these employees and interview them and talk to them about their skill sets and that sort of thing. Those are both employees I was fortunate enough to work with in a different company. They were fantastic team members in that company, and that company shifted its operations away from that social media management and that website design. So they were laid off from those jobs, and I was able to pick them up because I just knew they were fantastic people and wonderful employees.
It's a question of trust, of course. They do, once you mention Nigeria around here anyway, you immediately uh, get worried about possible scamming and all the rest of it. They'll tell you this can do this, that, and the other. And of course, as it turns out, they can do very little. Some of them, one shouldn't speak in general terms, of course, about people, because I'm sure you can find very good and honest and very helpful people. And thank you for pointing that out. And
And I do
inquire as
think
to,
scams. Oh, I'm
yeah,
sorry,
go
go
on.
ahead.
No, no, well, I was going to ask you, how do you identify these people? What, what, what do you use? What platform do you use?
So when I originally started working with my web developer, the company I was consulting with had hired him as a subcontractor from Fiverr. Fiverr does help quite a bit with that scam issue because it's a platform, it's a third party platform that manages the contract and the conversation between both people. It's a little bit like, Uber or Lyft or, a taxi cab service. There is a third party company that has a reputation built on providing quality workers. So we had started working with this gentleman on Fiverr. He wanted more regular work. He reached out to us and talked to us about what that work situation and contract situation would look like, and dropped his work on Fiverr to come work full time. And then I picked him up full time after that because you can't just subcontract outside of the Fiverr workspace if you're
Yes,
attached to Fiverr to
yes.
eliminate that scam stuff. In the Philippines, I do a lot of my hiring and my interviewing from a platform called Online Jobs PH. But scams are still part of, you can still run across people who are scam artists there. One of the really popular scams from that is they'll come and they'll work for you for 3 weeks, and then there's a family medical emergency or something, and they want an advance in pay. When you get that advance in pay, they disappear. You kind of have ways around that though. As a company policy, I always pay my employees on Monday for the week coming up, so they know I'm being honest, because it works both ways. American businesses will get to the end of the month and not pay for the work that they've received. So I pay for a week, I pay in advance, and then I never deviate from that working agreement. And we have released people from my operations who came in and said, "Hey, I need 3 weeks worth of pay in advance." And it's like, that's a trust issue you can't come back from in my book.
Well, that's very interesting, and thank you for sharing that. I'm sure a lot of people will be interested in how to find honourable and reliable people from abroad, rather than going for the obvious big companies who can really Okay, they mightn't scam you, but they'll certainly, they'll screw you on what they charge you and so on.
Yeah. And
Okay,
it's
well,
definitely my experience with the marketing space too. I get so much better quality attention from Alex because he's in-house. He's mine. I've talked to his wife. He sends me pictures of his baby. He's spoken with my husband. He knows my business. He has a vested stake in my business model being successful because he is my employee. Versus going through a marketing agency where I am a client, maybe I get an hour or two a week of their attention. And honestly, most of the time for most of the things I need done, Alex is as much as a marketing agency or less than a contract with a marketing agency.
right. So you started with Fiverr, really.
Mhm.
Fiverr, of course, is huge. They have a huge number of people on their books. I have to say that I haven't been very lucky with Fiverr, but maybe I didn't try hard enough. Is there anything else you'd like to tell us? Sorry for such an open-ended question.
No worries at all. I do think Fiverr is a place where you've got to spend a little bit of time, like you said. You've got to spend the time looking at people's portfolios and really assessing what you need. I knew I had four different brands that I needed social media management for. So it made sense for me to hire somebody. It does not make sense for me to hire a graphic designer. Number one, because of my background, but also I don't have enough graphic design to support that. So when I need graphic design done for a website or a lead magnet or something, I do go to Fiverr for that. But like in the writing space, I couldn't imagine hiring, for example, an editor from abroad. I couldn't imagine trying to have a non-native speaker edit a book or act as a literary agent or that kind of thing. So I think there's some limitations on what kind of work can be brought into that authorial space. But I do think there are some opportunities where creatives can use outsourced labor to get back to their creative energies.
Yeah. Okay. Is there anything commercial you'd like to tell us? Uh, a very brief description of what you do or what kind of clients would you like? Um,
Mhm.
yeah, go on.
So I primarily work with married business owners, particularly women, whose businesses have just gotten out of control in the scope of work-life balance. So you're these are women who are having fights with their spouse and not having time to go to school events for their kids, and they just work all the time. So I spend quite a bit of my time and energy helping them get their businesses back on the rails with business systems and processes. But one thing that may be of interest to your audience is I do a 90-minute workshop that talks about assessing whether or not you should hire somebody. And if you do need to hire somebody, do you hire a subcontractor or do you have a part-time employee or a full-time employee? That's something that your listeners, your audience could access for free. I set up a coupon code for you. It'll be Andrew24, and I will send you a link to that workshop so you can put it in your show notes or your social media captions. So if anybody's interested in really thinking through, who would I hire? How would that look like? What would that look like? Can I afford it? That's kind of all in that 90-minute workshop, which your listeners can have for free.
And thank you very much. You're a good sport for coming on, uh, because this podcast is very much in its infancy.
Thank you so much for
And
having me on. And a little bit of good luck never hurt anybody. I appreciate the invitation. I enjoyed speaking with you. And if there's ever anything I can do to support you in your endeavors, please don't hesitate to reach out. I would be more than happy to help.
thank you very much. By the way, have you ever been to Ireland, Snow?
I have not, disappointingly enough, it is
Very
on the
much.
bucket
And
list.
goodbye for now.
Bye, Andrew. Thank
Bye.
you.